There's a pattern that has bankrupted two of the most powerful empires in human history. Rome controlled the Mediterranean for centuries. Britain ruled a quarter of the planet. Both thought they were invincible. Both were wrong. And the pattern that destroyed them is repeating right now in the United States, stage by stage, dollar by dollar, base by base. In 117 AD, Rome stretched across 2.5 million square miles. The legions were unbeatable. The economy was strong. And within 150 years, the empire was bankrupt, the currency was worthless, and barbarians were sacking Rome itself. In 1920, Britain controlled 13.7 million square miles, 24% of Earth's land surface. The Royal Navy ruled the seas. The pound was the world's reserve currency. And within 25 years, Britain was broke. Borrowing from America just to survive, forced to abandon the empire it had spent 300 years building. Today, America has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. We spend more on defense than the next 10 nations combined. Our national debt is $36 trillion and climbing. The interest on that debt now exceeds our entire defense budget. We just retreated from Afghanistan after 20 years, leaving billions in equipment behind. And half the country can't afford housing while we spend trillions defending borders on the other side of the planet. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is math. This is history. And the pattern is so consistent, so mechanical, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. There are 5 stages to imperial bankruptcy. Stage 1, rapid expansion. Defensive wars become offensive conquest. Stage 2, peak power. Global dominance, prosperity at home. Everything seems sustainable. Stage 3, overstretch. The costs exceed the benefits, but no one admits it. Stage 4, financial crisis. Debt spirals, currency debasement, inflation. The economy can't support the military anymore. Stage 5, collapse. Loss of territories, internal breakdown. The empire ends not with a bang, but with a bankruptcy notice. Rome went through all 5 stages. Britain went through all 5 stages. And right now, in 2025, America is deep in stage 4. The warning signs aren't coming, they're already here. In 264 BC, Rome was a regional power in Italy. Respected but not dominant. Not an empire? Not yet. And then Carthage, the great naval power of North Africa, threatened Roman interests in Sicily. Rome went to war. The First Punic War. It was defensive. Protect Sicily, protect trade, protect Rome. They won. And they didn't stop. Second Punic War. Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants, invaded Italy, nearly destroyed Rome at the Battle of Cannae. 50,000 Romans dead in a single day. This was existential. Survival. Rome fought back, won again, and this time they burned Carthage to the ground, salted the earth. Took Spain, took North Africa, took control of the Western Mediterranean. Still defensive, right? Protecting Roman interests. Third Punic War. Carthage wasn't even a threat anymore. Rome destroyed it anyway, then Greece, then Asia Minor, then Gaul, then Egypt. In 100 years, Rome went from defending Italy to controlling the entire Mediterranean. Every conquest justified as defensive. Every war preventing the next war. Stage 1 complete. Now came the Golden Age. 27 BC, Augustus became the first emperor. The Roman Republic was dead, but the Roman Empire was born. And for 200 years, the Pax Romana, Roman peace. The greatest period of stability and prosperity the ancient world had ever seen. At its peak under Emperor Trajan in 117 AD, Rome controlled 2.5 million square miles, 70 million people. 30 legions, roughly 150,000 professional soldiers stationed from Britain to Mesopotamia. The roads stretched 250,000 miles. Aqueducts brought water to every city. Public baths, amphitheaters, the Colosseum. Roman citizens in the capital got free grain, the dole. This was the peak. This was stage 2. The empire worked. The provinces paid taxes. The legions kept the peace. Trade flourished. Rome was the center of the world. And it seemed like it could last forever. But here's what nobody noticed. The empire had stopped expanding. Trajan was the last emperor to conquer significant territory. After him, the borders froze. Hadrian built a wall across Britain. A literal line saying this far, no further. Why? Because they'd hit the limit. The empire was now 10,000 miles of border that needed constant defense. Every mile required soldiers, forts, supply lines. The Germanic tribes across the Rhine, always raiding. The Parthians and Persians in the east, a constant threat. The Dacians in the north. Rome wasn't conquering anymore. Rome was defending. And defense is expensive. By the 2nd century AD, military spending was consuming 50% of the imperial budget. 30 legions, permanent garrisons, frontier fortifications. The costs were immense. But the conquests had stopped, which meant no new loot, no new slaves, no new tribute. The empire had become a defensive machine that cost more every year while producing less revenue. This is stage 3, overstretch. Then it got worse. The Antonine Plague hit in 165 AD, killed millions. Possibly smallpox, possibly measles. Roman soldiers brought it back from Parthia, and it spread everywhere. The population crashed, fewer taxpayers. Then the plague of Cyprian in 249 AD, another pandemic. At its peak, 5,000 people a day were dying in Rome. The tax base was collapsing, but the borders still needed defending. The Germanic tribes didn't care about plagues. They kept attacking. So Rome faced a crisis. Fewer people, less tax revenue, but the same military costs. Actually higher costs because the threats were increasing. What do? You need soldiers. You need to pay them. But you don't have the money. Rome's solution? Debase the currency. Stage 4, financial crisis. Under Augustus, the denarius, the Roman silver coin, was 95% pure silver. By 260 AD, under Emperor Gallienus, the denarius was 5% silver. They debased it by 90%. Why? Because Rome could mint more coins, pay the soldiers, fund the military. Simple. Except it caused hyperinflation. Prices increased 1,000% during the 3rd century. The currency became worthless. Soldiers refused to accept denarii. They demanded payment in food, in goods, in anything real. The economy collapsed. Trade broke down because no one trusted the money. Tax collection became impossible because the coins were worthless and people fled to the countryside to avoid tax collectors. And the empire started falling apart. The crisis of the 3rd century, 235 to 284 AD. 50 emperors in 50 years, most assassinated. The legions were choosing emperors, killing them, choosing new ones. Germanic tribes were crossing the Rhine. Persians were invading the east. And Rome was bankrupt. The military still existed, but it couldn't be paid. The government still existed, but it had no money. Emperor Diocletian tried to fix it in 301 AD with the Edict on Maximum Prices, price controls. He declared maximum legal prices for everything. Bread, wine, labor, transport. He thought he could stop inflation by law. It failed immediately. People just stopped selling. Black markets exploded. You can't fix a currency crisis with price controls. By the early 4th century, the empire was ungovernable. Diocletian split it in two, the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire. Why? Because it was too big, too expensive, too broken to manage as one unit. The West kept declining. The army was increasingly made up of barbarian mercenaries because there weren't enough Romans left to fill the legions. And you know what happens when your army is barbarians? Eventually they stop fighting for you. 410 AD, the Visigoths led by Alaric sacked Rome. The first time in 800 years that Rome had fallen to an enemy. 455 AD, the Vandals sacked Rome again. 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a teenager, was deposed by a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer. The Western Roman Empire was over. Stage 5, collapse. And here's the key point. Rome didn't fall because the barbarians were strong. Rome fell because Rome was bankrupt. The legions couldn't be paid. The borders couldn't be defended. The currency was worthless. The government had spent 200 years trying to defend an empire that cost more than it produced. They debased the currency to pay for it, and the empire collapsed from within. The Eastern Empire, based in Constantinople, survived another 1,000 years. You know why? Because it was smaller, defendable. It had secure borders protected by water. It didn't try to hold the impossible. The West did, and the West died. That's the pattern. Stage 1, expand. Stage 2, peak. Stage 3, overstretch. Stage 4, financial crisis. Stage 5, collapse. Rome followed it perfectly. And 1,500 years later, the British Empire would follow the exact same script. In 1600, Britain was a minor European power. Smaller than Spain, smaller than France, an island kingdom barely relevant on the world stage. And then the East India Company was chartered. Commercial expansion, trade, profit. Not conquest, just business. By 1700, Britain had colonies in North America, trading posts in India, a growing navy. Still not an empire, not yet. Then came the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763. France and Britain fighting for control of North America and India. Britain won, took Canada from France, took control of India. Suddenly, Britain wasn't just trading. Britain was ruling. Then the Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815. France under Napoleon tried to dominate Europe. Britain stood against him. 20 years of war, massive costs, but Britain won. The Royal Navy controlled the seas. British power was unmatched. And just like Rome after Carthage, Britain didn't stop. The 19th century became the age of British expansion. Africa, Asia, the Middle East, the Pacific. The empire grew and grew. By 1920, the British Empire controlled 13.7 million square miles, 458 million people, 1/4 of the planet's land, 1/4 of the world's population. The sun never set on the British Empire because Britain had territory in every time zone. This was stage one. Rapid expansion justified as commercial, as defensive, as civilizing. But really it was conquest. And then came the peak, the Pax Britannica. 99 years from 1815 to 1914 of relative peace and British dominance. The Royal Navy was the most powerful in the world. The two-power standard. Britain's navy had to be larger than the next two navies combined. And it was. London was the financial capital of the world. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. If you wanted to trade internationally, you used pounds. British industry dominated. In the 1870s, Britain produced 50% of the world's coal, 50% of the world's iron. British technology, British ships, British capital financing projects on every continent. And here's the amazing part. In 1898, Britain's defense budget was only 2.5% of GDP. That's incredibly low for an empire controlling 1/4 of the planet. How? Because the empire was profitable. India alone paid for its own administration and military. The colonies generated revenue. The Royal Navy protected trade routes that enriched British merchants. The system worked. Stage 2. Peak power. Everything seemed sustainable. And then, 1914. World War I, the war that broke Britain. It started in Europe. Austria, Serbia, Germany, Russia, France. Britain could have stayed out. But Germany invaded Belgium, and Britain had guaranteed Belgian neutrality. So Britain went to war, to defend Belgium. Defensive, right? Except the war lasted 4 years. 886,000 British soldiers dead. 7 million wounded. And the cost, £35 billion. In today's money, $8 trillion. Britain entered World War I as the world's largest creditor nation. Other countries owed Britain money. Britain exited World War I as a debtor. Britain now owed money, primarily to the United States. The war had cost everything, but it got worse. Because Britain won the war, and as a reward, the empire got bigger. The League of Nations gave Britain mandates over Iraq, Palestine, Jordan, parts of Africa. So now Britain had more territory to defend, less money to defend it with, and a massive debt. Stage 3. Overstretch. The 1920s and 30s, Britain tried to cut military spending. The 10-year rule. Assume no major war for 10 years, so cut the defense budget. But the commitments didn't shrink. Britain still had to defend Europe, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, India, Africa, Southeast Asia, Australia, the Pacific. The Royal Navy was now expected to fight in 3 oceans simultaneously. Impossible. And then 1939, World War II. Germany invaded Poland. Britain had guaranteed Polish independence. So Britain went to war again. 6 years. Hundreds of thousands more dead. And the cost, £120 billion. 7 trillion in today's money. Britain fought on every continent. North Africa, Europe, Asia, the Atlantic, the Pacific. Churchill called it fighting above our weight. He knew Britain couldn't afford it. But what choice was there? Let Hitler win. So Britain borrowed. Borrowed from America. Borrowed from Canada. Sold assets. Liquidated investments. By 1945, Britain had won. The Nazis were defeated. The empire still existed. And Britain was completely, totally, utterly bankrupt. Stage 4. Financial crisis. The national debt in 1945 was 270% of GDP, the highest in British history. Britain owed the United States $3 billion. That loan wasn't paid off until 2006. 61 years of payments. The economy was shattered. Cities were bombed. Industry was damaged. The people were exhausted, and Britain still had an empire to defend. India, with 400 million people, was in revolt. Independence movements in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, all demanding freedom, and Britain didn't have the money or the soldiers to hold them. 1947. India and Pakistan gained independence. The crown jewel of the empire gone. Why? Because Britain couldn't afford to keep it. The Indian independence movement was strong, yes, but the real reason was financial. Britain was broke. 1949. The pound was devalued 30%, from $4.03 to $2.80. A humiliating admission that the currency wasn't worth what it claimed. And then, 1956, the Suez Crisis. The moment everyone realized Britain was finished, Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain and France, the old imperial powers, decided to take it back. They invaded. Militarily, they won. Politically and financially, they were destroyed. The United States refused to support the operation. Eisenhower told Britain, "Withdraw or we'll destroy the pound." America threatened to sell its sterling reserves, which would have collapsed the currency. Britain had no choice. Withdrawal, humiliation. The message was clear. Britain was no longer independent. Britain couldn't act without American permission. The empire was over. Everything after Suez was just managing the decline. Stage 5, collapse, 1960s. African colonies gained independence. Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, Uganda. One by one, the map turned from red to independent nations. 1967. Britain announced withdrawal from east of Suez. All military bases east of the Suez Canal would be abandoned. The Middle East, Asia, the Indian Ocean. Britain was pulling out. Why? Couldn't afford it. The defense budget was cut from 7% of GDP in the 1950s to 5%, then to 3%, 1971. Final withdrawal from the Persian Gulf. The bases closed. The troops came home. 1982, the Falklands War. Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, tiny British territory in the South Atlantic. Britain sent a task force 8,000 miles to take them back, and barely succeeded. The Royal Navy had been cut so much that Britain struggled to defend small islands against Argentina. 1997. Hong Kong handed back to China. The last major colony, the British Empire, which had controlled a quarter of the planet, was over. Today, Britain has 145,000 active military personnel. In 1945, it was 38 million. The Royal Navy has 75 ships. In 1945, over 900. Britain is still a wealthy country, but it's not an empire. It can't be. The choice was, bankrupt yourself trying to hold the empire, or give it up and survive. Britain chose survival. 2 world wars. 2 victories, total financial exhaustion. The empire died not because Britain lost wars, but because Britain won them and went bankrupt in the process. The pattern played out perfectly. Expansion, peak, overstretch, financial crisis, collapse. And now, let's talk about America, because we're not watching this pattern from history books. We're living it right now. In 1945, World War II ends. Europe is destroyed. Asia is destroyed. The Soviet Union lost 27 million people. Japan is occupied. Germany is rubble. And America, untouched. The mainland never saw combat. American industry produced half the world's manufactured goods. The US had the only functional navy, the only strategic bomber fleet, the only nuclear weapons, total dominance. And just like Rome after Carthage, just like Britain after Napoleon, America didn't go home. The troops stayed. Germany, occupation. Japan, occupation. Why? The Soviet Union, communism, the new threat. So America built bases, hundreds of them. Europe, Asia, the Middle East, the Pacific. NATO was created in 1949, a military alliance that committed America to defend Western Europe permanently. Then 1950, Korea. North Korea invaded South Korea. The UN responded, but really it was America. 3 years of war, 36,000 Americans dead. And when it ended, the troops stayed. Permanent bases in South Korea, still there today, 75 years later. Then Vietnam. The domino theory. If Vietnam falls to communism, all of Southeast Asia falls. So America committed. 1955 to 1975, 20 years, 58,000 Americans dead. 3 million Vietnamese dead, $1 trillion in today's money, and America lost. Saigon fell. The helicopters evacuated from the embassy roof, humiliating. But the global commitment didn't shrink. The bases stayed, the alliances stayed. The logic was, we must contain the Soviet Union everywhere, or we'll have to fight them here. Every base, every treaty, every commitment, all justified as defensive. Stage 1, expansion, and then 1991. The Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War was over. America had won. And this was the unipolar moment. One superpower, no rivals, the peak. Stage 2. The 1990s were extraordinary. The US military demonstrated overwhelming dominance in the 1991 Gulf War. Saddam Hussein's army, the 4th largest in the world, was destroyed in 100 hours. America's economy boomed. The longest peacetime expansion in history. The tech revolution. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, all American. The internet, American. Hollywood dominated global culture. The dollar was unchallenged as the world's reserve currency. And for the first time since World War II, America ran a budget surplus. 1998, 1999 surplus. The debt was shrinking. Military spending dropped to 3% of GDP. Everything seemed sustainable. This was the moment to come home. Close the bases. End the commitments. Let Europe defend Europe. Let Asia manage Asia. Become a normal country again. But America didn't. And then September 11th, 2001, the Twin Towers fell. The Pentagon was hit. 3,000 Americans dead. And the response was war on terror, not war on Al-Qaeda, not war on the Taliban, war on terror, a concept, an emotion, which meant war everywhere, forever. Afghanistan, 2001, justified. Al-Qaeda was there. The Taliban harbored them. American forces overthrew the Taliban in weeks. Mission accomplished. Except the troops stayed. 20 years. Then Iraq, 2003. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11, but America invaded anyway. Weapons of mass destruction, they said, except there weren't any. 8 years of combat operations, trillions spent, and the troops are still there. Then Libya, 2011. Intervention. Gaddafi was toppled. The country collapsed into civil war. Then Syria. Then Yemen. Then Somalia. American special forces operating in dozens of countries most Americans can't find on a map. And the bases multiplied. Today, over 750 military bases in 80 countries. Troops stationed on every continent except Antarctica. The 5th Fleet in the Persian Gulf. The 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean. The 7th Fleet in the Pacific. Defense treaties with 31 NATO countries, plus Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines. America is committed to defend half the planet. And then Ukraine, 2022, Russia invaded. America isn't even in a formal alliance with Ukraine, but we've sent over $75 billion in aid. Military equipment, intelligence, training, and now the conversation is pivot to Asia, contain China, more commitments, more bases, more costs. This is stage 3, overstretch. Here's the math. America spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. The official 2024 defense budget is $886 billion, but that's just the Pentagon. Add veterans benefits, add intelligence agencies, add nuclear weapons maintenance under the Department of Energy, add homeland security. The real number is over $1.5 trillion annually. And what's it defending? Europe, which is wealthy enough to defend itself. Japan, the 3rd largest economy in the world. South Korea, richer than most of Europe. The Persian Gulf oil fields, even though America is now energy independent. Shipping lanes that benefit Chinese trade as much as American. We're defending the world, and the world isn't paying us for it. Rome made conquered provinces pay tribute. Britain extracted wealth from colonies. America spends trillions and gets nothing back except the privilege of spending more. And now, stage 4, financial crisis. The national debt, 2001, $5.8 trillion. That's 58% of GDP, manageable. 2008, the financial crisis, $10 trillion, 2012, $16 trillion, 2020, COVID, $27 trillion, 2024, $36 trillion. That's 123% of GDP, and it's accelerating. We add $1 trillion of debt every 100 days now. Every 100 days. The interest payments on that debt in 2024 are $892 billion. That's more than the entire defense budget for the first time in American history. We're now borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money we already borrowed. That's a debt spiral. That's what happened to Rome. That's what happened to Britain. And just like Rome, America's solution? Print money. The Federal Reserve printed $5 trillion between 2020 and 2021. Quantitative easing, stimulus, free money. And just like Rome's debased denarius, it caused inflation. 2022, inflation hit 9.1%, the highest since '91. Groceries, gas, rent, everything. The currency is losing value, and the dollar's dominance is eroding. In 2000, 71% of global currency reserves were dollars. Today, 59%. China and Saudi Arabia are doing oil deals in yuan. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they're creating alternative payment systems to avoid the dollar. The world is slowly moving away from American currency. When that goes, the game is over. Because America's superpower isn't the military, it's the dollar. The ability to print the world's reserve currency and have other countries accept it. That's what allows America to run massive deficits and still borrow cheaply. When the dollar loses reserve status, interest rates spike, borrowing becomes impossible, and the debt becomes unsustainable. Britain's breaking point was 270% debt to GDP. We're at 123% and climbing fast. And the cracks are showing. Afghanistan, 2021. America withdrew after 20 years. Chaotic, humiliating. The Taliban took over in days. America left behind $85 billion in military equipment. Helicopters, armored vehicles, weapons, just abandoned. That's what collapse looks like. Not a dramatic defeat, just exhaustion. Can't afford it anymore. Go home. The military itself is struggling. The Army missed its recruiting goals by 25% in 2023. Young people don't want to join. The weapons stockpiles are depleting. We've sent so much equipment to Ukraine that American readiness is declining. And the infrastructure at home is crumbling. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives U.S. infrastructure a C- grade. Roads, bridges, water systems, the power grid, all decaying. There's no money to fix it because the money is going to bases in Germany and ships in the South China Sea. This is the choice. You can maintain a global empire, or you can maintain your own country. You can't do both. Rome tried, Britain tried, both failed. And America is following the exact same pattern. Stage 1, expansion after World War II, check. Stage 2, peak power in the 1990s, check. Stage 3, overstretch after 9/11, check. Stage 4, financial crisis right now, check. The only question is, what does Stage 5 look like for America? 3 empires, 3 different centuries, 3 different contexts. The exact same 5-stage pattern. Let's put the timeline side by side because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Stage 1, expansion. Rome 264 BC to 146 BC, 118 years from the First Punic War to controlling the Mediterranean. Britain 600 to 815, 215 years from the East India Company to defeating Napoleon. America 1945 to 90, 46 years from World War II to Soviet collapse. Notice something? It's getting faster. Rome took over a century. Britain took 2 centuries. America did it in half a century. Stage 2, the peak. Rome 27 BC to 188, 207 years of Pax Romana. Britain 1815 to 1914, 99 years of Pax Britannica. America 1991 to 2001, 10 years. A single decade of uncontested dominance. Stage 3, overstretch. Rome 180 AD to 235 AD, 55 years of defending impossible borders. Britain 1914 to 1945, 31 years, 2 world wars, bankruptcy. America 2001 to 2012, 19 years from 9/11 to COVID. Stage 4, financial crisis. Rome 235 to 284 AD, currency debasement, hyperinflation. Britain 945 to 967, debt at 270% of GDP, Suez humiliation. America 2008 to present, 36 trillion in debt. Interest payments exceeding defense spending. We're here right now, Stage 4, and history says Stage 5 comes next. What does Stage 5 look like for America? Rome's version was collapse. The Western Empire stopped functioning, 476 AD over. Britain's version was managed decline, India gone, Africa gone. Empire shrunk to survive. America's version may be controlled. Bases close, troops come home, allies defend themselves. The dollar loses reserve status. We become a normal country, or maybe chaotic. Internal crisis, political violence, supply chains break. The empire tears itself apart while trying to hold on. We don't know which, but the pattern says it's coming. And here's what matters. Every empire thinks it's different. Rome thought the legions were eternal. Britain thought the sun would never set. America thinks technology makes us immune. We're not. The pattern doesn't care about aircraft carriers or nuclear weapons. It cares about math. Can you afford what you've committed to? Rome couldn't. Britain couldn't. America can't. Not forever. And modern empires collapse faster. Rome took 200 years. Britain took 100. America? Maybe a decade. Financial systems move at the speed of light now. Debt compounds instantly. The warning signs are everywhere. 36 trillion in debt. Dollar losing dominance. Afghanistan withdrawal. Recruitment crisis. Crumbling infrastructure. Political chaos. This isn't random. This is Stage 4 becoming Stage 5. The people in power don't see it. They never do. They think more spending will fix it. More printing. More debt. It won't. It never has. Every empire that maintained commitments it couldn't afford went bankrupt. Every empire that debased its currency faced collapse. Every single time. 3 empires. 3 times the pattern played out. 3 times they thought they were different. 3 times the pattern won. Rome fell. Britain declined. America is in Stage 4 right now, heading into Stage 5, following the exact same script. The only question is, do we change course? Come home. Prioritize America over empire. Make hard choices before they're forced on us? Or do we pretend the debt doesn't matter? The bases are essential, right up until the day the math stops working. History has the answer. We just don't want to hear it. 3 empires, same pattern, same ending. And you're living in the 4th empire right now. It's reading from the same script, line by line, trillion by trillion, base by base. Check the math, check the history. We're in Stage 4, and Stage 5 doesn't ask permission. It just happens.